certainly one of the big focuses that we saw during 2023 has been this kind of continual ramp up of operations of the whole system back to pre-pandemic levels. Really, runway collisions is an interesting one because it's one of the few safety topics that we have that really brings together all the different actors in the system, looking at this whole landscape of technological change and making sure that we have the right regulatory and particularly certification building blocks for the future, whilst also being able to solve and manage the risks as they evolve in a rapidly changing world and a rapidly changing industry.
Responsible for the certification, regulation and standardization of civil aviation safety standards in the European Union, the European Union Aviation Safety Agency oversees aviation safety and engages in activities aimed at ensuring the safety and regulatory compliance of civil aviation across EU member states. Alongside its responsibilities of promoting international cooperation, developing common safety rules, the agency works closely with national aviation authorities, regulatory bodies outside of the EU, and industry stakeholders promoting global aviation safety standards and harmonizing regulatory practices. AeroTime sat down with John Franklin, Head of Safety Promotion at EASA, who spoke on the agency's safety promotion actions and shared insight into the European plan for aviation safety. So, John, it's a pleasure for you to join us here today with the AeroTime studio. And we just want to take a brief overview of your role as the Head of Safety Promotion of the European Union Aviation Safety Agency. Can you just give us a bit of insight into what are some of your responsibilities and how that contributes to the overall safety of the European Union airspace?
Thanks ever so much for having me on. It's great to have the chance to explain a bit about what we do and talk about some of the safety activities that we have going on. So in terms of safety promotion, so maybe you're aware of the European Plan for Aviation Safety that sets out the strategic actions that we take to solve the greatest safety challenges that we have in the European aviation system. So within the EPAS, we have kind of the traditional actions that people are used to. So things like rulemaking, research, and those kinds of activities. But certainly over the last 4 or 5 years, we focused on increasing how we communicate and improving how we communicate and having more and more safety promotion actions. So those safety promotion actions broadly come from 3 places. So the first one is promoting any changes to the rules. And we do a lot of work on that, particularly in areas most recently on evidence-based training, on fuel management, the new rules there, a lot of things at the moment preparing for the changes or the introduction of ground handling regulations, things like that. We then have probably the majority of our work is focused on promoting mitigations to the top safety issues that we see. And you know, you've hopefully seen our annual safety review, and the safety review identifies those main safety challenges. It gets fed through our safety risk management process and identifies then the most appropriate actions for safety promotion. So that's probably our biggest role, is promoting mitigations, particularly to organizations in industry. So one of the things we're very aware of is that the last thing any airline or airport needs is EASA communicating directly to their staff. So from our side in safety promotion, we're very much focused in terms of our audience on operational managers and safety managers in operational organizations to provide them the tools to use in their specific context of their organization, how they operate, where they operate, their local processes and procedures, to help improve safety at a local level. So we're kind of a key part of that cascade. And then the other side is when it comes to accident recommendations, is that one of our roles then is quite often an accident investigation body might identify safety promotion action from an investigation. So we also get involved in that side of things. So that's the 3 core main activities that we do in safety promotion that's sitting within my responsibility.
Now, you've just described those main responsibilities. I want to take a bit of a deeper dive here. and look at more on the operational side, as you've briefly mentioned. What are some of your top priorities, especially going into 2024, that you'll be focusing on?
So we have to have two different approaches to the way we articulate the safety challenges that we have. So we look at something we call the key risk areas in the European regulatory system. So they're the accident outcomes we're trying to prevent. So particularly at the moment, in fact, we just did a post on our AirOps community about this yesterday. So particularly focused on airborne collisions, and particularly looking at future integration of iconspicuity methods, particularly in parts of the airspace where you might have commercial aircraft operating with general aviation, with helicopters as well. So certainly around potentially the smaller airports is where the greatest focus of that work is. Then for many years, and continues to be a big focus, is around aircraft upset and loss of control, and particularly a lot of focus then through the flight crew training system to prepare pilots for whatever situation they might face in the cockpit, to ensure that the aircraft is under full control all the time and any emergencies are handled in the right way. And then the other area particularly that we were already focusing efforts towards is around prevention of runway collisions. And we saw the events in Japan earlier in the year. It highlights the importance of focusing on that risk and strengthening the mitigating barriers that we have across the system. And particularly runway collisions is an interesting one, because it's one of the few safety topics that we have that really brings together all the different actors in the system. If you look at aircraft upset, quite often it involves the flight deck and the airline. But when it comes to runway collisions, it brings together people, everybody operating and using the airport, air traffic control as well. So there's lots of actors to get involved in working on that safety challenge. And then associated with that, and maybe we'll get into that in a bit more detail as we go through the interview, is there the outcomes we're trying to prevent? And then we also have the different causal contributory factors, the safety issues, as we call them, that might lead to different outcomes. So particularly one area we're focused on a lot at the moment, we had at the end of January a fatigue conference co-hosted with Control in Vienna, where operators came from across Europe to share best practices on fatigue risk management for flight crew particularly.
Just now, taking a look at some of those causal factors that you highlighted there, what were the most prominent challenges that you faced into 2020 in 2023? And are you seeing that carry over going into 2024?
So one of the things I think we've particularly seen since COVID and the return to operations and the continual increases, obviously we had a lot of people in the aviation system, whether it's working for airports or airlines or other organizations, who obviously weren't operating and working for a considerable period of time. We saw quite a few people at the kind of top end of the age spectrum particularly retire and leave the industry. We've seen quite a lot of changeover of personnel. Even if people have stayed within the industry, a lot more people moved from one organization to another with new processes and procedures. So certainly one of the big focuses that we saw during 2023 has been this kind of continual ramp up of operations of the whole system back to pre-pandemic levels, and what that means for all of the different people in the workforce, depending on their different roles and activities. So particularly focused around current skills and training. And certainly we did a lot of work the last 3 years. We've done every year in the run up to the summer a safety week surrounding basically getting ready for the summer season, and this idea that now after a period of perhaps quietness in the industry, getting back to full speed. So certainly that's been one of the big things, and we've seen particularly this challenge with skills and knowledge has been one of the big things. Fatigue I've talked about is one of the key topics that we're continuing to focus on throughout the year, and then all of the different operational challenges particularly around the aerodrome and on the operating areas of the airport, where particularly we're looking at, we're moving towards the implementation of the ground handling regulations. We had quite a few changes to the aerodrome rules, particularly around things like language proficiency for people driving around the ramp, so that we get more understanding and awareness of what's going on the ramp. And then particularly one of the other areas that we've been looking at is then supporting runway safety teams around all the different airports around Europe with all the different stakeholders involved. So that they're kind of the same themes that have been following on from the ramp up of the pandemic in 2023, particularly where we kind of finally saw the real summer ramp up, and then the same into 2024. And actually, and then associated with that, we talked about the summer, but similarly around the skills and the general knowledge around winter operations as well. So last year, as the summer was starting to come to an end, we did a whole webinar series on winter readiness that we will then continue to do, again, particularly around skills like de-icing and of aircraft as we head into the winter months, being ready for that with the right skilled and trained people as much as possible.
Now, taking a bit of a broader look here, of course, one of the core aspects of safety regulation does involve widespread collaboration with a various number of authorities, institutions, and bodies as well. Now, what is your experience of that in 2023, obviously going into 2024? And could you give us a forecast of what that might look like and what objectives you'll be focusing on in the years ahead?
So in terms of collaboration, it's something that's been, for a long time, I think, one of the strengths of the EASA system. And we have this network of advisory bodies that particularly help to bring together the member states and the national authorities of the member states, and then all the different players from across the industry in a way that that provides this collaborative framework to enable all of this work to take place. So within the advisory bodies, we have the member state side, we have a group called the MAB with the 31 EASA member state authorities. And then below them, we have different domain groups, particularly covering all the different domain topics. So flight crew training, air operations, maintenance, et cetera, et cetera. And then similarly with the stakeholder side, we have the stakeholder advisory body, again, that brings together most of the main associations. So it's chaired by IATA. And then we have organizations like ACI, CANSO, and covering all of the spectrum of different organizations. We also have representatives from the European Transport Workers Federation, European Cockpit Association, the staff bodies, and then other domains, so the European Helicopter Association, people from general aviation as well, so particularly GAMA, the GA Manufacturers Association, the Pilots, Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, many others. Like, I'm sure I've forgotten lots of people, particularly involved in the SAB. So apologies to anybody who's listening and I've missed out their organization. But we have this network of collaborative groups and these advisory bodies that discuss right through the cycle of the safety risk management process. So looking at what are the strategic priorities, are we being truly data and risk driven, and identifying the right problems and then solving them in the right way that supports the growth and the safety of the industry at a time when society is expecting us as an industry to really stand up and meet the sustainability goals that I think the wider public have set for us. And at the same time where we're looking at rapid technological change, we all see the pace of AI and other technological advancements. So particularly making sure that we focus on the basic foundation of safety that the industry has spent a long time building up, introducing technology safely and dealing with those sustainability goals and challenges that the public have set. So there are kind of three big focus areas. One additional one that kind of supports that in terms of from a more operational perspective is the concept of sharing one airspace. So we see new entrants, obviously eVTOL community, more drones coming online, general aviation, as well as the needs of the rotorcraft community and increasing commercial aviation traffic. So bringing all of those together in an airspace safely is then a kind of key follow-on activity. We've done very well as an industry, but there's lots of potential change coming. So it's keeping on top of that and ensuring that safety is never compromised.
Now, just taking a tangent on one of the factors that you did mention, which is the technological advancements. Obviously, the industry is seeing, rapid developments in this sector, and with that, comes the associated opportunities as well as risks as well, be it in aviation technology or artificial intelligence. The use of drones as well as you mentioned. Now, how is EASA proactively adapting its safety promotion strategies to address some of these opportunities and risks as well?
So I think it's worth mentioning it's much broader than just safety promotion. It's kind of the wider strategy of the agency in general in how we deal with technology. So particularly our certification colleagues very much focused on ensuring that we are, as an agency, able to support the certification safely of new technologies, whether that's new technologies in terms of automation in the cockpit or aircraft in general, new propulsion methods. Certainly there's lots of work being done on electric propulsion and hydrogen technology and things like that. Also then with the supporting infrastructure. So I think we were certainly one of the first, if not the first, regulatory authority in the world to provide a regulatory framework for vertiports, for example. Similarly, when it comes to AI, I think it's over 2 years now since we first published our AI roadmap for aviation. And with the speed of technology change, it's something that we're continually updating and evolving. And we have lots of experts around the organization looking at all the different aspects of technology. Similarly, we have a team of people looking at cyber security risks and cyber and other security hazards to the industry. Also looking at the evolution of potential health risks to the agency, to the industry. So looking at this whole landscape of technological change and making sure that we have the right regulatory and particularly certification building blocks for the future, whilst also being able to solve and manage the risks as they evolve in a rapidly changing world and a rapidly changing industry.
Now, when looking at the certification of eVTOLs or unmanned aircraft systems, which some say is around the corner, coming in the next couple of years, what is EASA's view on the implementation or the integration of some of these innovations into the existing aircraft airframes?
So obviously, there's lots of different focuses in terms of the different aspects of eVTOL. So the first one is then around the airspace in general, and particularly the use space development as part of the drones regulation and the associated development of that has been a key activity for the agency. We've also been very focused on, particularly around eVTOLs and UAM, urban air mobility. We recently launched an IAM hub with resources that are there to support the whole developing of that part of the industry. So particularly it's with resources looking at, if you're a city planner, for example, and you want to know, well, what kinds of things do I need to think about as we're redesigning our urban environments to enable us to integrate this kind of eVTOL new technology into our city landscapes? What does that look like? So it's something we're continually evolving that material, providing support even to those different parts of our public communities. Then also from the vehicles themselves, our certification colleagues are working very closely with any new applicants that we get, as well as looking at the rules that we have that surround certification of different products to make sure that they're evolving as the technology evolves. And then the other part of that picture is then the operating model and looking at what does that look like in terms of whether it's the manufacturers themselves and I know some people already involved in the VTOL industry where potentially you have that kind of through cycle where the operator is potentially also the manufacturer. How does that feed through to different operating models is something that's still under development, but is going to be a key part, the heart of that, is then integrating particularly eVTOLs into our cities, into our landscape, the wider aviation landscape safely. And then how do we integrate that with rescue helicopters flying around, doing the work that they do, smaller drones, general aviation, and the more traditional aviation, commercial sector that we have, and making sure that from an airspace perspective, we maintain and improve the level of safety that we already have and we're already used to, and nothing is compromised.
Still on the same topic, could you pinpoint what would be some of the safety considerations or regulatory challenges that will arise with the widespread adoption of some of these newer technologies?
So one of the particular things is around the certification basis, and then the evolution of new technologies in service, and making sure that we can maintain the reliability and the certification basis that we have for these future products. As the technology moves more quickly, it obviously becomes more difficult to keep up with the pace of technological change. So particularly our certification colleagues put an awful lot of effort and a lot of activities around supporting and making sure that the level of safety we're used to is improved and built on, and that we don't compromise safety as these technological changes come in, particularly, say, from a certification perspective, and then once a product's in service as well.
Now, maybe just taking a look at the future here, are there any changes or upcoming changes, be it in safety or regulation or advancements in safety, that may have an impact on the industry? And if so, how are you preparing stakeholders for those scenarios?
So certainly one of the biggest ones that are when we look at the traditional airline sector, is one of the big changes that's coming in the next year and beyond, is the new rules on ground handling. It's almost the last area of the aviation ecosystem as we know it that hasn't got a formal regulatory framework in the way the other parts do. So our aerodrome department colleagues have been working with stakeholders from across the different parts of the industry to make sure that we can support the industry in this new part of the regulatory framework. So firstly, there's been a lot of work to build the regulatory system around the things that we've already done safely for many, many years, and different frameworks that have already existed that airports and airlines have used to ensure the safety of ground handling, and that continues and is improved on, and then particularly through lots of communication and promotion of those new rules to help that implementation. And then kind of following on from that is then the wider, what we call integrated safety risk management, and bringing the whole aviation ecosystem together so that we're better at managing the risks that cross some of the traditional boundaries between flight deck into ATM and the airport and the aerodrome. And as we saw in some of the recent accidents that have happened, I was talking about runway collision risks earlier, is the better we can get at integrated risk management, the better we can manage the risks that we'll see in a rapidly changing society. Now, particularly when you add into that cyber risks and security risks that we have a lot of work on, particularly one of the other big regulatory changes that has come in over the last year or so is Part IS, that provides this regulatory framework around supporting cybersecurity risks, and bringing those in with the more traditional risks and helping organizations kind of get better at all of that is one of the big steps going forward. One of the other projects that we have that I've not had a chance to mention yet is our Data for Safety project, where we work collaboratively with stakeholders from across the industry, particularly at this stage with manufacturers, with airlines, with national authorities, and with ANSPs, to make the most out of all of the data that's available in the system so that collectively we can pool our data knowledge into a data lake that enables us to make effective decisions as an industry without the pockets of data. So I think that's another big step we've got moving forward.
Now, still looking and peering into the future, what message do you have for young individuals who are looking to pursue careers in aviation safety, as well as contribute to enhancements in the industry for aviation safety? What's your message to them?
So I was very lucky as an individual. I grew up, my father was in aviation, worked for a regional airline at a small airport in Norwich in the east of the UK. And I got to grow up. We joke about it. I think a lot of us of a certain age in the industry, you smell the aviation fuel and it kind of runs through your blood a little bit. And we got those opportunities to understand what the industry was about and kind of get this passion for it. And it's certainly one of the things that we see lots of projects all over Europe trying to get young people excited about aviation in a way, as a whole new generation, hopefully realizing that aviation is more than just the flight you take on holiday. You don't get that window into the industry, particularly as aviation's grown and grown. Additional security requirements mean that it's not easy to go and visit your local airport and get into aviation the same way perhaps you could 30, 40 years ago. So collectively, many different people in the industry are working to push that message out to people as young as possible into schools and universities and get people excited about aviation again. And at the same time, kind of the key message to young people is that aviation is a really exciting, dynamic industry to work in. There are lots of opportunities beyond the traditional things that people see through normal media. So things like pilots, cabin crews, engineers. There are so many different, really diverse and exciting roles that people can do in aviation that my big message would be to look beyond the traditional employees in aviation. Try and seek out many opportunities that are now available. There are so many exciting influencers and people out there sharing their experiences about all the different parts of the aviation system and get out there and learn and come and join our community of people. Certainly in my time, I found aviation is an industry like no other. I know I'm maybe a bit biased because it's all I've done since I was 17 years old, but it's a real community and it's more than just going to work 9 to 5. The things that our industry achieves for our communities, whether it's connecting people, helping business thrive, supporting all the great things that, for example, helicopters do and drones are going to do in the future, enabling people to do so many amazing things that, come and be part of our community of aviation.
Thank you for sharing that, John. Now, as we come to the end of our interview, are there any misconceptions that you may want to address to the public or clarify about aviation safety?
So I think one of the biggest things is when you pick up a newspaper, or not so much pick up a newspaper, but go online and look at the news, there are quite often different stories about aviation accidents and events. And I know people, even friends of mine that I speak to, there's quite often a perception that aviation isn't as safe as the reality actually shows. In the global aviation system, the number of accidents that have happened in the last 10, 15 years compared with the years that have gone past, certainly from the 50s through to today, the level of safety in aviation has improved immeasurably. And things are so safe. You compare that to other modes of transport, other things that we do in our lives every day. And I have friends of mine who, for example, ride motorbikes regularly and consider that to be something that generally is pretty safe. But aviation is so many more times safer than so many of the things that I know people are quite happy to do every day, but then perhaps scared to go flying or worried about things they read in the media. In aviation, we have a long history of learning from the past and looking to the future to identify what risks are going to come in so that we can prepare ourselves for the future. I think as an industry, we've generally done that very, very well. We have a very, very safe system that gets millions and millions of people from A to B and back again very, very safely. So I think that's the biggest thing, is that despite what people might read in the press, aviation as a system is exceptionally safe, and we continue to work together as a community to make sure that it stays that way for the years to come.
Oh, John, thank you very much for joining us today and really sharing your insight into aviation safety. Thank you.